Some things just go together. Wine and cheese, flowers in springtime, and yes, books and bottles. We pair your favorite author with your favorite drink. Your host of Books and Bottles, Benita Johnson.
Hi, welcome to Books and Bottles. This is season 3, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for making our show so great. We could not do this without you. Books and Bottles is a show where we introduce you to your favorite author, his or her work, and we pair it with your favorite wine and spirit. If this is your first time here, you're definitely in for a treat. Season 3 is loaded with wonderful authors and really phenomenal books. And if you've been back, we really appreciate you as well. We invite all of you to share, share, share. So this season, y'all, I am in DC full time, and I am honored to be hosting our show from my good friend, celebrity chef Rock Harper's restaurant or his bar called Hill Prince Bar. And if you're familiar with DC or not, is in Northeast 1337 H as in Henry Street Northeast. It's a bar, but it has so many spaces. And if you've had the pleasure of eating Rock's food, maybe you can get him to cook something for you. So we appreciate him for hosting us and letting me just camp out this season. So we want to jump right into this season because we're kicking it off with somebody really, really special. This young lady's name is Jamila Minix, and it has to be all that and something else to have your book become a literary award winner. So the book is called Moonrise Over New Jessup. Isn't this a beautiful cover, y'all? And it is the winner of the 2021 Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction. Okay. And it's an enchanting and thought-provoking debut about a Black woman doing whatever it takes to protect all she loves out in Alabama. So this is so fitting and so timely. So without further ado, I welcome Miss Jamila Minix.
Hello. It's so good to be here. You're in
Yes,
DC.
I am honored to have you. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I have to say, I am blessed to have a signed copy of your book.
Ah,
I think I missed you by a day down in Richmond at the RVA Book Bar. And so I think I
yes,
went in the
yes.
next day and they still had some signed copies. So my copy is signed. So I was like, I gotta
Oh,
have this
wonderful.
lady on the show. So I really thank you for agreeing to join us on our debut show for season 3.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I see that you're in DC. You're not too far from me. So,
Oh,
that's
we
cool
gotta
too.
meet over at Hill Prince. Drinks
Yes, we
on Rock.
do. Now I have a new place to go. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Does he know?
So I read a little bit about you, and I know you have a legal background. So what
Mhm.
prompted you to do this fiction work?
Well, I went to law school and I had all these really grand plans, ambitions of appearing before the Supreme Court and really making an impact in sort of the legal world, in the civil rights space. And as I got into my career a bit, I realized how difficult it is to become a Supreme Court practitioner, but also how I felt like, in certain ways my voice was not being heard, or not, sort of getting lost among the fray, particularly about Black communities and the places I cared about, the people I cared about most. So I started writing fiction as a way to sort of supplement, my own curiosities, my own ways that I was feeling about the world. But I have to shout out Howard University School of Law, because, we're taught at Howard that a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. And so I did feel like I was not using my social engineer status to the best of my ability. It wasn't that I was being a parasite necessarily, but I felt like I had a stronger voice to put into the world. And so fiction it's just such a great way to interrogate myself, interrogate the world, and just have fun, playing around in places that, I sort of heard about coming up, or, places I invent in my head.
It's so interesting. Through your character, Miss Alice Young, who is like the
Mm-hmm.
main character, I think, of the book, and her husband, Raymond, you
Mm-hmm.
introduce us to something that sometimes some of us forget. Everybody wasn't down with integration. It
That's
wasn't
right.
as easy as, yeah, we just, we all just want to be together and get along. And so
Mm-hmm.
Alice, was in this, she came to this town, New Jessup, after living, with her dad and her sister went off and she married Raymond. And Raymond was this, all about um making change. And he was an activist, you know, in every way. And Alice kind of was the bit she wanted stability. And I think a little bit it was about fear because she had already lost, the closest folks to her. And so she kind of wanted to be stable. So how did you come up with um Alice and who she is and what she represents?
Well, I think it's interesting when Alice is the women in my family. My people are Alabama from as far back as I can pretty much trace for the most part. So I did find out the other day that I had an ancestor from Mississippi, and I know of another from Georgia by way of New York. But for the most part, my people are Alabama. And so Alice was sort of easy in that regard because she draws from all these incredibly strong, intelligent, funny, just really incredible women who also very much know their own mind. And, she meets Raymond, and keep in mind, Raymond was an activist, but Raymond wasn't moving, he wasn't trying to promote integration. And I think that's a
Right,
really important point in the book, because what he's trying to say is we're entitled to our economic rights, we're entitled to our voting rights. But he says in the book, my child will go to an integrated school over my dead body. This is not about integration in any form. We just want the money and the electoral rights that we're entitled to.
right. So
So,
it's kind of
you
like
know,
we want equal. We don't necessarily want to be where you are. Just give us what we're due.
right, but even in that conversation about we want what we're due, the conversations are so nuanced because, even today when we have conversations about reparations, you put 10 Black people in a room talking about reparations, you're going to have 10 different ideas about what to do with the money. And that's not to
Right.
say that we're not entitled to reparations, but I do think that those conversations are really important to have. And so, in New Jessup, you had all these young people, you had some of the elders, you had all these different people with different ideas about what independence and self-reliance could, should, can, will look like. And so it was interesting to put them together because at the end of the day, they had the same ends, but it was just the means to get there that were really the interesting thing to interrogate.
And through all of that political and social weaving, you still managed to write a love story,
Mm.
because there was
Yeah.
definitely the romanticism between these two. There was the weaving of, I forgot her sister's name, Dot, the sister-in-law. Um,
Yeah, that was Dot.
yeah, so they had her and her husband,
Hmm.
Raymond's brother, had their way of love, but you still managed to
Hmm.
write that love in there. So how challenging was that for you to have this socially conscious fiction work that is also a love story?
It wasn't, to me, that wasn't the hard part at all. Because to me, and I was just in Mississippi having this conversation with Zelda Lockhart and Deisha Philyaw talking about writing from within the community. And, to me, in our communities, we have these beautiful, full, rich lives where we fall in love, we have rivalries, we get in trouble, we have straight A students, we have all these achievers, we have people who are sort of middling, we have people who are always running around, running their mouth like Percy. We got every type, right? And
Yes.
so when we write from that perspective and really explore the richness of our community, then the social issues, because they're living against that backdrop, right? But the social issues become, how does this particular, what I like to call encroachment, affect their ability or affect what they're doing in the moment, right? So it's
Yes.
not sort of this juxtaposition of Alice and New Jessup against the world, because the world is New Jessup, right? And so it's like, okay, well, what sorts of encroachments are they dealing with and how do they deal with them? But in the meantime, what does life look like inside New Jessup? So, people fall in love in different ways. I mean, Dot
Yes.
and Percy certainly had their brand of love. She yanked his chain more than once. And Alice yanked Raymond's chain more than once. But I mean, they all had their different ways of loving each other. And that to me was worth exploring more than just
Yeah,
this
I like
constant,
the evolution
yeah,
of the love. It changed,
yes.
changed forms, but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely was still there and still strong. So,
Mm-hmm.
is this your first? I know you did other literary work, but is this your first novel?
This is my debut novel, yes. Yes.
So, how great is that to have won awards for your first? I mean, who does that?
You know, so when you win the Penn Bellwether Prize, Barbara Kingsolver calls you. And, she's no stranger to writing whatever piques her interest, right? And so one of the things that she said that really stuck with me the most was, she could have never written this book because she couldn't envision a world where Black people were against integration. And, I sort of said, well, exactly, right? Because these are the stories I came up hearing. My people are from Demopolis, Alabama. And so it wasn't always, the ice is colder and the grass is greener. It was, this is the stories that I came up with. But, you know, when you have people saying this is a story that you don't get to see commonly, it feels good not for me, but it feels good because I have the honor of elevating stories about Black people in Alabama and Black people in the
Yeah.
South that we just don't get. And then, of course, now when I'm on tour, I'm going to Minneapolis next week, and there's an enclave that used to be called Rondo. And so when I was
Okay.
there a couple months ago, people were like, New Jessup is Rondo. So I get to go to all these different places and meet all these extraordinary people. And so it feels really good to elevate these histories because a lot of these folks are still alive.
Yeah, and I think
So,
New Jessup
yeah.
does represent a whole lot of the city, not just cities in the South,
Mm-hmm.
because we always think that
Mm-hmm.
these things only happen in the South, but there are cities all over
Mm-hmm.
this country that are New Jessup ish, and
Mm-hmm.
you had some of
Yeah.
the same challenges with Black people and people of color trying to find their way and maneuver in this space. So I really appreciate the story for so many reasons.
Uh,
So we're going to take a pause for a second, Jamila,
sure.
and bring on our wine expert. So I want to
Okay.
introduce to you all again my very good friend Rochelle Lee. As y'all know, I am a franchisee of Wine Crawl, and so is Miss Rochelle. She is the franchisee of Wine Crawl Raleigh. Rochelle, hey,
Hello, hello.
Hello.
thank you for
Hello.
being here today.
Thank you for
So
having
before we
me.
get into what you do and what's going on in Raleigh, what's in your glass? Because we gotta have
Ooh,
something, right? I don't know what
I
this
Yes.
is.
didn't
I
put
ran
any.
down to the bar and they put something in it and I'm drinking it.
Hey, I was waiting for you, but you started without me. But what I have is a Panache Lane Bodacious. Is from Wine Shop. So very fruity wine. It has blackberry, blueberry, and plum. In the aroma, it has black currant and coffee.
Mm.
So it's very
Mm.
sweet. But the tannins in it is very high, which I was surprised about
Oh,
that. Appellation, it comes from California. The alcohol content is 13.5. I was a little
oh,
shocked
did you say
because it's
17?
really 13.
Girl, you gotta go somewhere
13.
and take a nap.
But it's really sweet, so
Okay. So let me ask you, let's talk about
delicious.
wine crawl and how you got into wine and your interest and being a part of this wonderful organization that we're a sisterhood in this, right?
Yes, we are. So how I got
Okay.
into wine, I wanted a girls' night in. And I was looking for an expert or consultant to come to my home and kind of walk us through the whole wine process, and I couldn't find anyone. So the one person who did reach out to me on Facebook lived in New York. So I was like, well, how's that going to work? So she said we could do it virtually. And I was like, I didn't want that. She said, well, I'll just teach you how to do it. And just so happened there was a training in Charlotte coming up in about 2 weeks. So I went to the training, and that's how I got introduced to wine. So
that's fan.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So as far as getting into Wine Crawl, it's a very funny story because I was at a Chicago style stepping event, and one of the guys that was putting on the event, I asked him about doing a fundraiser with wine. So we talked a little bit, and then he asked me, do you know Glenn Murray? And I said,
everybody
no.
knows
And
Glenn Murray in Chicago. They got like a big old billboard up right downtown with his face on it.
I didn't know. So he told me I knew nothing about wine because I didn't know Glenn. So that was the end of the conversation. So after that, I go to Facebook. So I'm like, who's Glenn? Who's Glenn? Who's Glenn? So I found out who Glenn was. We chit chat a little bit. He sent me some information. We talked a couple of times, and now I'm the franchisee for North Carolina.
That's awesome. So do you have any cool things coming up?
I am working on an event for Global Champagne Day. So the plan is to do champagne and charcuterie, and also a girls' night out.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you for being here. I know how hard you're working for Wine Crawl in Raleigh, and I invite our viewers who are in that area or even close, or just can get to Raleigh, to support the event, because you're doing fantastic things down there. So I appreciate you being a part of Books and Bottles, and of course being my sister in Wine Crawl.
Yes, same here. I appreciate everything you do for me. Anytime I need Benita, she's always there to give me advice, tips on wine, everything.
Where there's wine, I get there. Hang out with us a little while, Rochelle. So Jamila, I have a question. Since you knocked it out the park on your first novel, tell us your writing process. How do you, I think a lot of us, me, have, sit down to try and, write books, and, we got all these distractions. We have all these ideas, and we kind of know the end of the book before we write the first sentence. What was your process to churn this book out?
So keep in mind, I did NaNoWriMo. I did my first NaNoWriMo in 2019. And during that process, I sort of taught myself how to write a book. I took a lot of really excellent tin house intensives. And I don't have an MFA or any sort of master's degree in creative writing. And so for me, it was, while I was practicing law, trying to figure out how to write creatively, because law is sort of the anti-creative writing. So that first novel that I did was from NaNoWriMo, like I said, and that took about 6 months. And it was just really me teaching myself how to write a book. And so that a lot of it is, if I ever returned to it, I would basically rewrite it, because I love the idea, but the book itself is just too voluminous to edit, so to speak. But in that, I also wrote some short fiction, and I really honed down on the craft of writing. I came up around storytellers, so telling a story wasn't the issue, but making it into a book was the issue. Okay. So by by June of 2020, New Jessup Alice was just sort of talking to me, and I said, I'm just going to write a story that's on my heart. And it just came out in a way that felt really urgent. And so I used whatever time I had. I was working in a really demanding and sort of thankless legal job, but my hours were at the time between 4 and 7 because it's COVID. So I would work between 4 and 7 in the morning, then go about my day, and then at night return to it after I unplugged for the day. But I think the most important things you can do as a writer, first of all, is have some sort of system or process where you're actually, it's like a schedule where you know this is the time of day that I can avoid distraction, but also it's the time when my brain feels most creative. My brain is not creative, after about 5 o'clock these days, but because I write full time, I can work from 4 a.m. until whenever. Some people work, best after 10 o'clock at night. Some people work best all day. Robert Jones Jr., who wrote The Prophets, he woke up at 3 a.m., worked for an hour or two, I think, and then went back to sleep and then woke up and went to his day job. So one of the biggest things that I say is that people need to have sort of a writing structure. It's a practice, but you also need to figure out what time of day I think your writing is most creative, like when you have best access to your creative brain.
Okay. So I think I hear a lot of folks, talk about the process and their process. And of course, everybody's process is their own, and you kind of find what works for you. And I think, just like you said, I think one of the keys is just to find that and just to keep writing. Sometimes we
you
get
got to show up.
And we put down the pen and, it's like, okay, I don't feel like doing this. And I'm telling you, I have a lot of started projects and I want to finish them. I look back at a list that it was like a goal list that I did of 2019, which was, of course, right before the great interruption that is the pandemic. And so through this goal list, I had 6 concepts. And so, like, sometimes we look back at that and we say, okay, this is too overwhelming. We can't do this. But truly we can. It's just take one word at a time and one project at a time. And, we may have multiple projects. So I appreciate you for sharing, that, although this may not have been the one you started with, it's the one that's out here now. And you can always go back to the first one.
Yeah, and I always say I needed that first novel and I needed that early short fiction to teach me to write New Jessup. I didn't wake up one day as the writer who could write New Jessup. I had to grow into that writer. And so whenever people are starting out and they say, I want to write a novel, I think we put so much emphasis on the length. And what happens if you start by teaching yourself just to write a short story? It's not, short stories are challenging and fun and accessible. And they're a great way to sort of get in and sort of teach yourself your own craft and your own style. So I also say, don't get married to the idea that the only writing worth writing is novel length writing, because that's not true.
So I'm going to ask you this last question about the book, because like when we talked about don't get married, do you, like when you started Moonrise Over New Jessup, did the book end the way you thought it would when you started?
Not really. Yes and no. You know how it ends, so I won't spoil it for
folks out there. We want our viewers to buy the book. Moonrise Over New Jessup. Let me hold it up against for folks. So go ahead.
But I don't plot my stories. I've let Alice talk to me, and in fact, when there were times in the book when I thought, well, this would be a great way to send Alice, or this would be a great point to sort of make in the book, she just would stop talking and be like, well, you can go on up the road if you want to, but, I'll be right here waiting on you when you stop inventing my story and let me tell you what's going on myself. And I think that too often we try to manipulate characters and people and the stories into an end that suits us. But the people in our stories are individuals. We're not writing our own autobiography.
Yeah, so stories, right?
Right. We're telling somebody else's story. And these people, if we do it right, they're living, breathing, sensual, loving, manipulative, lying people, right? And so they're going to make decisions that we wouldn't make. So for me, I couldn't necessarily write the end that I wrote until I knew the rest of the story. So I suspected that it would be something in that ballpark, but the actual ending, it's still, I still get surprised. I still cry at the same parts, laugh at the same parts, because it feels very much like I'm still with Alice. I'm not writing a story that I contrived out of my own head.
Well, I can vouch for the book that there's a lot of times to laugh, there's some times to cry, and there's a lot of time to celebrate. So I commend you on a phenomenal
Thank you.
story. And again, thank you for being here. How can people purchase your book?
So if you go to my website, it's JamilaMinix-Minix.com. There's a place to say where you can find New Jessup. New Jessup is a fictional place, so this is not a map to New Jessup, Alabama.
I Googled it to make sure it wasn't a place in Alabama I just never heard of.
It's based on the 1,200 Black towns and settlements that have existed in this country, but actually New Jessup is a fictional place. But if you go to that portion of the website, you can see all the local retailers. I always say, or all the retailers, you can buy it online. I always encourage people to go to their local indies, particularly their Black-owned indies. We have some great ones here in DC, as a matter of fact. But wherever you can find it locally, I always encourage you to go in there and pick it up there too. And the library.
And if any of you folks are like me and we're constantly on the road, it's definitely on Audible. Even though I have the hard copy, I listen to it because I'm always in the car. So I am so appreciative when books are available on Audible. So thank you again for being here. Rochelle, how can people find out about upcoming events in Wine Crawl Raleigh?
At winecrawl.wine.
Winecrawl.wine. So I thank both of you again. I really appreciate you being here. Jamila, you are in DC, so we got to meet real soon. You know where Hill Prince Bar is. We can meet here anytime. I'm here quite often. I'm not ashamed to say.
All right, well, I'm on the way.
So to all our viewers, and we have authors out there who would like to be a part of the Books and Bottles experience, please email us at info@prod.com. We love to have you. We like to thank you again for tuning in. We want to thank Rock Harper for allowing us to crash this space at Hill Prince Bar. And we invite you to tune in again next week. And remember to share, share, share. So until we see you again, thank you. Keep reading. Cheers.
Join us, Indie TV, where you will see the talk shows, movies, drama, action, and comedy. Be the first and see it first. Sign up now for free at indie